A very warm welcome to all our viewers today. Today, we'll be talking about the influence of literature in our society. And with us, we have two panelists, Barabyang and Oliver Joe. A very warm welcome to both of you. One, Joe is a writer, a columnist, and wears a lot of hats. So does Barabyang. She's an educationist and a founder of Krishan Foundation. Once again, welcome to our program today. See, today when we talk about literature, because you both are educationists and working in the field, how do you think literature has evolved over the years, and how is it influencing our society today, especially our society of Meghalaya when we talk about in context to that?
Well, if you say literature at the moment, there are different forms of literature. So when we're sitting here as educationists, when we talk about literature, we talk about literature in the academia, in universities, in schools, and in colleges. But literature is not subjected only to that frame or in that circle, but literature also goes to novels, to comics, to mangas, to manhwas, and even to what people call fan fictions, right? So when we grew up, we started reading, like we had this conversation, we started reading Archie's, Tinkles, and then we moved towards Enid Blyton, the famous five, Secret Seven, and then Harry Potter, and so on and so forth. That built us up to where we are right now. My English, my way of speaking, my way of talking is because of those books that I started reading. But when we talk about the youth of today, at least when I see my cousins and I see my niece, my nephews, they don't have that upbringing. Their upbringing is mostly looking into serials and shows and movies and such. They see, say, The Notebook. We know The Notebook as Nicholas Sparks reading it on a hardcover, whereas people actually read it. I mean, they just watch it on TV and they say that The Notebook is a movie, not an actual book. And when we introduce it to them, they'll be like, oh, this is actual good. It's based on a movie. It's not that the movie is based on a book. So let's say that, in my opinion at least, literature has lost its essence. The art of reading has lost its essence. The idea of owning a book is, how do I put it? It is just a namesake, for that matter, right? Like, you give a book because, oh, I like reading, but then what do you do with that book? You take it, you post a picture, you post a selfie, and it's there on your social media, right? What do you say?
I definitely agree with Joe, that there's an evolution when it comes to, this habit of reading. Like in our generation, we're children of the 90s, so we were completely dependent on reading those books to transport ourselves to a different world. But in today's generation, with social media, with, different types of AI also, it has really influenced the way we see books. And as Joe had mentioned, there are many bookstagrammers, right? Instagrammers, influencers who influence with respect to reading, but sometimes it may just be, like just clicking pictures with a book. But I do see that these bookstagrammers are making a change. They are showing that yes, reading is also important, and you can be a part of this elite group if you read. So, I think trends are changing because of social media, but but that habit of reading, it's become very less. Like I can see it in the students who I teach, maybe say at the university level. They don't want to pick up a book because they say that it's too heavy. They would rather look at maybe something on YouTube or something, like to give a shorter version, a gist of, say, like a particular book or something like that. So I feel like the habit of reading has really changed in that way. But there are, due to these TikTok trends and these Instagram trends, some people who are more like, in that elite kind of group, they just want to read because it's a trend and not because they have to, because they're bombarded with too much of things on social media and things like that. So I do see that there is an evolution, and children are not as dependent on reading books as our generation. So
I think one of the most important thing which comes out across, yes, of course, with you've said, and even Oliver has said that there has been obviously a generational change, and that is what we see when we talk about the evolution also of things. One thing, which you have very rightly pointed, and I'm sure our viewers or our viewers who are parents can relate to, is that sometimes when you club it into an elite club, because it is what in general term we would say you'd be the cool club.
Yes.
You're accepted. So you're basically doing it not for the enthusiasm about it or with the mindset that I want to read, actually go into in depth, but more of belonging. So I think with the generation, belongingness and coolness has its it has its bifurcations. One, like you've said, like they're more into watching content material, which is of course with a very short span of time, which doesn't take say a fraction of a second or a few seconds. Then actually picking up and reading a book, because I think with the evolution of reading also, it has changed from, of course, we are a generation where we still like to pick up a book and actually go into the depth of literature, how it is, the stories, or even have the short stories, or when you have not only like again how you said novels, but plays, because this is also a part of a strong backbone of literature in conveying it through generations of storylining, storytelling rather.
Yes.
But in that aspect, how do you think is it translating? Because when it comes to youth, we realizing, of course, there's a bifurcation. But how do you think it has impacted, or do you think there is still space among, we're not only relegated to youth, but the younger children who are, now stepping into that educational zone or stepping into education, and as parents, as 90s born and late 80s or those past generations, how do you think they can make an impact to the younger lot to reach? Besides, I know it's a challenging, but
that is quite a challenging concept actually to bring into the fray at the moment. But before I get to that, let me just take an idea of what you guys have just said. When we were younger, growing up in the 90s, reading was not deemed cool. We were not part of the cool kids. Okay, but now reading is as a concept, holding a book as a concept, or in this digital age, holding a Kindle or an e-book reader, that makes you belong to that elite group. Now, belonging to that elite group means you are a cool kid. So when we say the evolution of reading or the evolution of literature from the 80s, 90s to now to 2000s, you are stepping into being a cool kid for that matter. So there is an evolution, and there are people like at least our parents, they would want us to be in that zone of eliteness, right? So they would push students, or I mean like the kids, to actually start reading just for them to be in that foray, right? And with the advent of social media and social networking sites, with TikTok and Bookstagram, all these hashtags and all these things, just clicking a picture with a book saying, I own this book, regardless whether you read it or not. You can just take an AI summary of the entire book and talk about the book in volumes and volumes, right? So that is not wise, of course. Like going in depth to the chapter of the book will get you more ideas, but then just getting a summary of it also will enhance your thinking a bit, right? So coming to your question, how to actually bring people more into this foray, right? TikTokers, Instagrammers, having these hashtags relating to books and literature can actually introduce more people to the concept of reading new books, right? It might be books of the 20th century authors or the 21st century authors, even new people later on with, like I said, advent of AI, you can have a novel within a week, just like that, right? With old concepts, you can just say Shakespeare and Wordsworth combined, give me a fan fiction of a sci-fi movie, you'll get an entire novel. But because you would want your students, because I'm always talking about having human beings rather than cogs on the machine, right. You would want, like us as educationers, or later on when we have kids or we have our own nephews and nieces, we should introduce them to old timely classics, okay, like your famous seven, your Agatha Christie, you can have your famous five. These would enable them to have ideas and thoughts of their own, and maybe a glimpse of that past that we grew up in, because technically your murder mystery in the 14th century and your murder mystery in the 20th century is completely different. So maybe that is a little turning point, a little point where you can actually bring people into the foray of literature, right?
So to add to what Joe had just said, I feel like it's a matter of access to literature where you can see yourself, and especially in the context of Meghalaya and Northeast, we don't have much literature where we can see ourselves. So therefore that interest also may not be there, because sometimes you do want to see yourselves, yourself in those comic books maybe, and if not comic books, then in novels as well, right? So you become interested. That's why many a times when you see books by Janice Parriott or by Daribha Lindam, who's a first-time author, and then people, there's a huge following, and people become very interested because there are hardly people from this region. Okay, we have Anjum Hassan also and Daisy Hassan, but other than them, we hardly see. Of course, we have Joe as well, who writes, which is great. He writes from this region, but we don't see ourselves. So I guess that interest also, sometimes it may not be there because we can't see ourselves in literature. It's good that we read these classics, but we also need literature that comes from this region. For instance, running a library, our library, we get many books from all over India. So, it's an introduction to small children, let's talk about the Uttapam man, but we're not South Indians. How will Khasi kids know what an Uttapam man is? How will kids know what a dosa is? Because I'm saying, of course, city kids living in Shillong, they would know, but then in the rural areas, they would not know. So it's a matter of access and representation as well in literature. So we don't have that kind of representation. So sometimes it can affect, because setting up libraries also, sometimes schools will ask, okay, you've come to a rural area like this, do you have books in Khasi? Do you have books about Sir Lapalang? So I think that kind of representation needs to be there in order for us to encourage children to read, because you begin by looking at yourself before you look at anything else, right? You want to see yourself in a maybe in a picture or by reading literature. So
I think you've made a very important point also, like with coming to Joe also saying that yes, when you're not when you can't identify yourself with, or when we don't have many writers, and that is why I think one of the positive thing has been over the years, if not anything else, Lit Fest. We bring in introduction, but also there is a huge platform for our own people, our own writers to put up their work, first timers or seasons, because we've seen so many times, like you've mentioned Daisy Hassan and all, they are from the region, but where have they published their books? It's all, we don't have much publication as in regional publications, and most people don't even know that they are regional books. So yes, when you do this OWL project, how you said, or having access as a parent or uncles or in whatever level, I think giving an introduction to our regional writers is one of the way it can trickle down to actually literature, or something to do with our traditional storylining, telling, if not anything else, reach the younger lot. And especially like how you said in again it is like very when you say it's elite and non-elite, it becomes totally distinctive as a class system, in the sense of approach towards knowing and having interest to literature. Of course, accessibility is one, but also like, yes, when people can afford, the urban lot who can afford a Kindle, good for them. But if not, for rural students or children or the families who don't want their children also to be always having screen time, I think that is also another challenge. Not just having an excess of affordability, but to have that screen access, because we're already on cells, we're already on phones during COVID, and now with all the hybrid system of working, we're continuously with our screen, digital screen timings. So it affects health wise too. So limiting to that, I think it's still a start, we can still do, but yes, I think relatability to the character, because we were in a time where we didn't have any other stories. We would think ourselves to be in these kind of situations, but how you said that to create more. So when it comes to, again, regional, now I'm going to come to this question when we talk about regional writers. You both, and to that, Joe especially, you write columns and you know, you are into expressing. How do you think your writing is gets a feedback, or so, say how the young people or the even the older generations, why limit to all? Because again, we cannot just streamline only to younger people, of course, to carry the torch forward, absolutely. But I'm sure we have our storytellers and literature people, even from our senior years. So how do you think your writing, or how you feel when you write something, keeping in mind the audience, or how is it, you know, you get the feedback more importantly?
Yeah. So let me speak from a columnist point of view. The first ever column that gained widespread popularity that I published was in Shillong Times. The title of that column was "Can We Speak Khasi and Not Khalish?" Okay. And one of the justifications I gave in that particular column for writing it in English and not Khasi, and not publishing it in any other local diary, but publishing it in the Shillong Times itself, was the lack of people who actually read Khasi, Jaintia, or even the local dialects for that matter. Like, for example, I'm quite sure if you throw a stone here from where we're sitting right now for 100 feet, you'll ask the people that it hits, did you take Khasi or did you take additional English? You'll get 8 people who says I took additional English. Right. Why? Because they'll say Khasi is too hard. And why do we think that way? It's because most of our parents, most of our elders would say, no, I had to study 12 books of Khasi, but as if you take additional English, it's only 2 books, 1 prose, 1 poetry. That loses out for entirety of us. Okay, me myself, I will tell to the entire people watching here, if I read an English book, I can finish it in say 1 hour. But if I read a Khasi book, it'll take me at least 2-3 hours. Why? Because I don't know the actual words. Right. It doesn't flow, right? So if we really want to promote more local writers writing in the Khasi dialect, because I'm speaking Khasi here, no offense to anyone, because I'm basically I write in Khasi, I write in English, but then out of the hundreds and hundreds of things that I've written, I think it's only 2 or 3 things that I've written in Khasi, because I'm not confident. Nobody taught me that. Right. That is one of the major drawbacks and disadvantages that I didn't do, because nobody pushed me to take Khasi, right? And even after that, when I went to university, went to my colleges, I started working also, most of the content that I wanted to read would be in English, most probably because the other writers also had the same drawback that I did. Now, to encourage people to have a regional concept, a regional writing, we should start from the roots. Like make your local dialect be compulsory in schools, right? Have them to speak in Khasi all the time, or in Pana or in Gao all the time. That will encourage them to be able to read more or to write more. Of course, having it in the global English language would increase your income or intake from Western people or mainland India. But what's the point of doing that when your own local people don't understand? So what I'm trying to say is, for us to have more vernacular readers and vernacular writers, we should start from the grassroots. Like, for example, right now, she has her own Our Library initiative, but most of the books that she gets are English. Right. Now, if you trickle that down to the rural language, they will be good in English, but they will forget their Upa Kakame, right? Your father and your mother tongue, for that matter. So that is one way. Reach out from the roots, from the grassroots, but at the same time, when we are now at this level, fit to be parents, fit to be uncles, fit to be teachers, we should encourage people to be more in their own local dialect. That's one way.
Yes, to actually make an impact when we talk about putting up more literature content in our own language, so that you know, even a younger lot can relate to. So it has to be a balance between both. We cannot just shun away with how you said that about English, majority of it, of course. It's one of the world's most communicated language, but besides that, to also hold on to the roots, so that when we talk about the influence of it, how do we create an influence if we are not aware of our roots? I think that is very, very poignant what you said, that built it up. Coming back to you, like you said, you've already had these challenges and rightly so, because when they don't, and when you go back to schools also in say rural areas, they're starting to learn even English language. So they're both in that infantry stage of learning a language. So how do you feel, like, adding to what Joe has said, that creating a balance, it's of course very important to, in fact, to see that your regional language grows and actually creates an impact when we talk about it, when we're talking about in the sense of how literature can actually impact or influence people of Meghalaya, which can, of course, later on there are translations. How would you like to add something more to it? And
okay, so with respect to regional writers, especially when it comes to children's books, there are very less people who write children's books. One is Estes Aim. She has translated a lot of books for publisher like Katha. So but we don't see these books being accessible in stores. And we don't even have proper bookstores here, where you can sit and lounge and just read. Maybe we just have, say like National Book Agency, for instance, but you don't have a place where you can sit and relax and read, and you don't have access to these books written by regional writers, and many people don't even know. I just know about these writers because people have donated such books. There's Kinpam Singh Nonkandri also, who's, written Khasi books, and for the National Book Trust is also there. So a lot of children's literature is being produced in the Khasi, Garo, Jaintia languages. Okay, but where's the access?
That is one of the biggest challenge, I feel. So when there are actually big books written in regional languages to not only inculcate but to promote.
Exactly.
But accessibility is a big challenge.
It's not so. For me as a curator of books, when I tell people to donate towards our library, I know that these things exist, so I can send people a link, right? But not everybody knows. So I think that kind of awareness needs to be created, that there are writers like this. Go and buy books written by your local writers, and I think it's the duty of parents also, and uncles and aunties, to do this. And one major problem when it comes to regional writing, I feel, is because when you go to school, English medium schools, I have been targeted once upon a time as a child, where I used to love speaking in my own mother tongue. And even Khasi also, we have our own variations. I'm from Nongkram, so I speak Khasi in a different dialect.
Yes.
But everybody would make fun of me because it's not the mainstream Sora one, or
cooler version of
the cooler version of Khasi. But I speak my own dialect, and even teachers would scold me if I speak in Khasi. We would get punished. I remember being punished in school for speaking my own language. So where is the space to even hold on to your language? Like Joe was saying, he wrote an article about English and Khalish, right? So that whole issue comes in where we are being punished for speaking our own indigenous tongue.
But this is something I'd like to beg to differ, because when it cultivating and curating the language, it's important. But if we are to look at the homogeneity when it comes to the entirety of a school, it becomes a challenge, because again, like you say, charity begins at home. I think nowadays the parents tend to lose that whole thing of concept of actually having a conversation in a regional language, and it becomes more, with due respect, other languages. So that's one of the, I think, core crux of it.
What I'm trying to say is that, if you're being taught a language, say in class, if you're being taught Khasi in class,
right,
let us speak in Khasi. If we're being taught Hindi, let us speak in Hindi. Because obviously, we are Shillong is a very cosmopolitan place, and we need to speak in a language that everybody understands, so it won't be rude. But, to actually punish a child for speaking their language is, I think that's extreme. I think it's extreme. So therefore there needs to be that understanding that, you won't get punished for speaking your own language. So if you get punished, then it creates, psychologically, an effect, that, if I speak in my own language, I'll get punished. And as a child, if you're being conditioned that way, then obviously you won't be encouraged to speak in your own language, right? Because
you feel that fear gets instilled.
Exactly. So that is what I'm trying to bring out. Not that, we speak only in our own language.
Because I think for our viewers, it is very important to understand the both aspects of it. Because when our viewers are looking today or hearing a program today, they need to understand how your viewpoints are coming in, what you
Of
actually
course.
mean. Because sometimes again we think that, oh, okay, it's okay to speak in our language or say XYZ language
Yes, yes.
and randomly. But yes, the punishment, the creation of fear is something which is again hampering instead of
Yes.
explaining. And like you said, that is why it is very important for our viewers today who are viewing this program to understand that when you talk about regional languages or the impact of it, because if we don't know something, how will we read the beautiful literature and the stories which has? But having said that, it doesn't mean you impose other things, but have a balance about it. And especially like how you've said, that don't create a fear in a child, because it impacts very, very negatively in a child's psychological mindset, because of course they are just soft sponges. I think that's a very, very, as an educationist, I think it goes a very, very strong message to our viewers who are obviously teachers or education systems. I think it goes a very, very good and strong message that don't create and instill a fear because a child chooses to speak in their own mother tongue. Instead, you explain them how to go about it. I think that gives a more positive impact. We can go on and on, but unfortunately, we are so short of time. Just before winding up, just your parting thoughts. First, I'll go with you, and then with Joe.
Sure.
To our viewers who are listening, and especially parents and younger lot who are listening.
So what I would say is, we can always introduce the magic of reading through books with a lot of illustrations, because I feel that is a good way of, introducing children to something that is so beautiful, through pictures. It doesn't have to be something that is so hard-hitting, with a thick book. So we can start simple. We can, take baby steps and just start with an illustrated book. And I feel that that will really, really, encourage children to read.
I think that's a wonderful thing. Yes, Joe?
Yeah,
You're
just,
imparting.
just two things. We as a people, like I'm saying, we, the Khasi, Panav, Jaintia people, we are very accommodating. Right, we will speak in a common language for all people to understand. But then that doesn't mean just because you want to accommodate people, you will throw out your own identity.
Yes.
Right, we are fighting for Khasi being included in the 8th schedule. So we have to work towards that from the grassroots level, starting for ourselves. Okay, so doesn't mean that you have to be strict about it. Doesn't mean that you have to be punished about it. But if you want to be included as a national language for all, you start speaking about it. Secondly, like she said, we should have more regional writers aiming at the kids and the students.
Right.
We have people wanting to write novels and literature copying the Western concept. But we don't have adventures in East Khasi Hills or adventures in So'a. Maybe in 2 years down the line, I would love to have one of viewers coming up saying, hey, this is my book, Adventures in So'a, written in Khasi, maybe in the So'a dialect also. So that is something that we can go out from this panel discussion and have a thought
I think
about
that's
it.
one of the very important things you said, that when when we first started our conversation, you said the impact and how relatable a person feels, be it an adult or be it a child, especially how they can relate to the characters. And if you can relate to a character which is so based in your own place, it could be Sohra, it could be the hills where Sohra, but at least somewhere you have already vision, there's a place existing. I think it will be way more impactful to every one of us, because then you can relate to, and especially children, because they are looking up into something, they are seeing themselves as a part, or perhaps imagining themselves being in that that adventure what you're talking about. So all the best to you all both, and Joe, and hopefully we'll be getting to hear next time we have this, probably you'll be ending up with your own book, something and more regional. Thank you once again for being a part. It was lovely having you both.
Thank you so much.
I hope our viewers today has taken and will review how our local culture, our local literature and language can impact so much, especially to our younger minds who are searching for something good, who can relate to what our culture brings in. Thank you once again for being a part, and thank you for our viewers.